The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
This administration, we're cracking down on terrorists. We're securing our border. We're putting lethality in our military first. If Mike's leaving, that's the president's decision, and we support that.
Mike Waltz out as National Security Advisor. Marco Rubio in for now. The White House shakeup President Trump is playing down. Plus, pardon but not safe. Why a new investigation into the origins of COVID could still come back to haunt Dr. Anthony Fauci. And then we are just 2 hours away from a presidential commencement speech. What some of the students at the University of Alabama think about the high-profile keynote address. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin with the first shakeup at the White House in President Donald Trump's second term, happening today as National Security Advisor Mike Waltz is out and Secretary of State Marco Rubio is in until a permanent pick has been selected. State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce says the secretary is the right person to be that bridge for President Trump.
The president makes perfect assessments about who would implement his agenda, and in this case, he's chosen certainly the secretary and Mr. Waltz to facilitate his agenda moving forward.
National correspondent Atra El-Nashar is in Washington, D.C. with the latest in how we got to this point 3 months into the president's term.
President Trump is looking for a new national security advisor, a role that will temporarily be covered by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Mike Waltz leaving the job that put him in close proximity to the president and now prepares for a Senate confirmation process to be the U.S. representative at the United Nations. In a Truth Social post Thursday afternoon, President Trump said, "Mike Waltz has worked hard to put our nation's interests first. I know he will do the same in his new role." Waltz made national news in late March when the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic told the nation Waltz inadvertently added him to a Signal group chat with top officials, including the vice president, about U.S. military attacks on Houthi targets. President Trump publicly stood by Waltz, but behind the scenes, his standing in Trump's inner circle never recovered. If Waltz was on the outs, it didn't show.
It's an honor to serve you in this administration, and I think the world is far better, far safer for it.
Waltz was in the president's cabinet meeting Wednesday and even made an appearance on Fox News Thursday morning, praising the president.
This is leadership at its finest, led by our commander-in-chief who loves the troops and they love him.
Waltz's departure comes as the Trump administration is trying to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Gaza. Now, the position of National Security Advisor does not require Senate confirmation, so the president could find a permanent replacement quickly. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar.
Iran had no money when I was president. They were out of money. They were bust. They had no money. They weren't giving it to Hamas. They weren't giving it to Hezbollah. They weren't giving it to anybody because they didn't have any money. They were just about bust. And in fact, I put sanctions on last night. Any oil that anybody takes from Iran is not allowed to do business in the United States of America.
Mideast tensions now growing between the United States and Iran as President Trump pressures allies of Iran. This as the third meeting over Iran's nuclear program has been postponed. Iran says the U.S. is being contradictory and provocative with their messaging. And that was in reference to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's warning yesterday to Iran to stop its support for Yemen's Houthi rebels. He threatened that support continues. Iran will pay the consequence at the time and place of our choosing, end quote. And we are learning more about the new mineral deal signed by the U.S. and Ukraine last night. The goal here is to incentivize peace and generate revenue for both countries from Ukraine's natural resources.
This partnership represents the United States taking an economic stake in securing a free, peaceful, and sovereign future for Ukraine. This partnership establishes a fund that will receive 50% of royalties, license fees, and other similar payments from natural resource projects in Ukraine.
But it is worth noting the new agreement does not include U.S. Secretary guarantees for Ukraine. Instead, future U.S. military assistance to Ukraine will count as a fund investment. Ukraine's parliament will now review the agreement and soon decide whether to ratify the deal. And happening today, people are demonstrating around the world for May Day, also called International Workers' Day, to support unions and workers' rights. Anti-Trump protests are also happening in cities across the U.S., with protesters using May Day as an opportunity to criticize the Trump administration.
We are here because we say not on our watch to Trump's kidnapping and deporting of immigrants, to going after immigrant workers who are union organizers, like what happened in my home state of Washington, to deporting U.S. citizen children in the middle of cancer treatments.
A child with cancer was deported, but DHS says it was at the request of the child's mother, who is being removed following a final order of deportation. New details out of Illinois. State Police Director Brendan Kelly says that the driver of the car that crashed into a popular after-school camp, killing 4, was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol and may have had a medical emergency leading to the crash. The driver, who was not injured, is not in custody. No charges have been filed yet, but Director Kelly says the evidence of a medical emergency was not conclusive and the investigation is ongoing. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis held a news conference with the Deputy Director of ICE today, highlighting the new program, Operation Tidal Wave. The governor calling it the largest immigration enforcement operation seen in the country. The Deputy Director said the 1,100 arrests in Florida last week alone set a new standard, while Governor DeSantis talked about the message being sent to the world.
Directed by Governor DeSantis, working directly with ICE here in the state of Florida to create this historic partnership that will go down as the most single arrest done by a state in a single week.
It's important that the law is enforced. It's important that those people are taken care of. But what it also does is sends the message going forward, the United States of America is serious about enforcing its immigration laws.
But as the administration keeps border security a focus of their agenda, another migrant deportation effort has been stopped by the courts. A federal judge says Venezuelan migrants cannot be deported under the Alien Enemies Act. He says the effort exceeds the scope of the statute. The administration has already asked the Supreme Court to review these protections. Meantime, national correspondent Christine Frizell brings us a closer look at the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from El Salvador, with a May 9th deadline for more details on his case fast approaching.
On the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Trump administration giving no indication it plans to return him to the United States, despite an order from the U.S. Supreme Court to do so.
He is an El Salvadorian national. That is his home country. That is where he belongs.
The president apparently unaware this image he shared on social media had been photoshopped.
He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
Oh, he had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
Yeah, that was photoshopped.
Senator Lindsey Graham coming to his defense at a hearing on Wednesday.
What does that photo or those markings suggest to you?
Well, they suggest that he's an MS-13 member, that those are his markings, that's his brand.
While the calls for his release grow louder from Democrats, some of whom visited El Salvador, with Senator Chris Van Hollen even meeting with him there, documents continue to come to light about Abrego Garcia's past, which include his wife, leading the fight to bring him home, had filed a protective order against him that she never followed through on, in which she claimed he hit her and left her with a, quote, purple eye. And another one from 2020, in which she mentions a recording that he told her ex-mother-in-law that even if he kills her, no one can do anything to him. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries denying this report in the Bulwark. He wants fellow Democrats to put an end to trips to El Salvador to advocate for Abrego Garcia's release.
The only statement that was made to members who went to El Salvador was welcome back. We are glad you have returned safely.
Now, Democrats have been criticizing the president for the denial of due process for Abrego Garcia and so many others. And multiple polls just released show a majority of Americans no longer approve of President Trump's immigration policy, once seen as one of his greatest strengths. One Economist YouGov poll found 50% say he should return Abrego Garcia. Just 28% say he should not. Didi?
Yeah, that is interesting poll results, Christine. Democrats have been fighting this just about every day, as you know. They obviously have less power in Congress, but what's their next move? Any indication?
Yeah, so some Senate Democrats just today announced they plan to force a vote demanding answers on the Trump administration's compliance with these court orders. And they are also calling for a report on El Salvador's human rights record, saying if the administration fails to produce a report, security assistance to El Salvador would be prohibited by federal law.
Live from Washington, D.C., Christine Frizzell, thank you. New tonight, the director of intelligence determined to get to the bottom of the COVID origins debate. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci is at the center of a new investigation being launched with the help of NIH. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard told Megyn Kelly today on her podcast they are looking into whether or not the gain of function research that was going on in the Wuhan lab was in fact partially funded by the NIH and the U.S. On top of that, they're investigating whether or not COVID itself was part of those gain of function research, something Dr. Fauci testified repeatedly wasn't true.
If that's true, if it was Peter Daszak's research with the Wuhan so-called Bat Lady that caused this pandemic, then we did fund it. Then Anthony Fauci helped fund the pandemic.
The thing that he denied over and over and over to Senator Rand Paul's questioning.
That's right, under oath.
Under oath.
And what happens next, if proven, is up in the air. Dr. Fauci did accept a preemptive pardon from President Biden covering potential crimes from 2014 to 2025, but his reputation could be impacted. He could also be called to testify under oath again before Congress, and that wouldn't be covered by the pardon if he repeated his former claims. New vaccines will now have to be tested in placebo-controlled trials before they can be used. The Department of Health and Human Services said this will ensure vaccines are safe and effective. Some scientists think this could make it harder to update COVID-19 shots for new strains of the virus. HHS also announced it's developing surveillance systems to better measure vaccine risks. HHS says behavioral therapy is the best way to help children and teens with gender dysphoria. New HHS guidance for local governments and health officials advising against transgender surgeries, puberty blockers, and hormones. It contradicts the American Medical Association, which believes trans and non-binary gender identities are normal variations. Coming up next year on the National News Desk, the severe destruction Pennsylvania residents witnessed this week from extreme weather and the latest storm forecast. Plus, millions of pressure cookers are being recalled after dozens of injury reports. We'll tell you what you need to know. And later, the state that's considering completely banning social media for minors. We'll be right back in 90 seconds. now, 60 million Americans are at risk for severe thunderstorms, especially in parts of the Ohio Valley, into the lower Great Lakes, the lower Mississippi Valley, and the southern Great Plains through tonight. Some of the cities at highest risk include Dallas, Austin, and Fort Worth, Texas, Oklahoma City, and Columbus, Ohio. It comes after hundreds of thousands of people still don't have power in Pennsylvania as of this afternoon from severe storms this week that killed at least 4 people. Wind gusts as high as 90 miles an hour caused extensive damage in the Pittsburgh area, breaking utility poles, downing trees like that. A woman in Cambria County says a cell phone tower was completely wiped out.
We heard the wind blowing hard about 7 o'clock or so, and I come out and looked out my door and saw this pole here snapped off. And my husband come out and looked. He said, something don't look right out there at the cell phone tower. He went to the kitchen window and looked. I would have never dreamed on anything like this ever happening.
Elon Musk says Doge might be sticking around for the entirety of the president's second term, even if he's planning on scaling back his role while Congress takes the lead. The National News Desk, Matt Gelka, takes a closer look in tonight's Waste Watch report from Washington.
99.9%. The president praised Elon Musk during a cabinet meeting this week. The White House advisor and face of the Department of Government Efficiency is preparing to take a step back from government work.
You know, you're invited to stay as long as you want. At some point, I guess he wants to get back home to his cars.
Musk sat with a handful of reporters this week for a wide-ranging interview on his first 3 months with Doge. Along with anecdotes about crashing at the White House and having late-night ice cream, Musk admitted he thinks Doge has been effective, but not as effective as he'd like. He also admitted he thought they were getting things right about 70 to 80% of the time. Doge has claimed $160 billion in savings so far. While Musk has sometimes made a spectacle out of downsizing the federal government, Congress will now have to play a role in enacting some of the Doge cuts. Iowa Senator Joni Ernst says that starts with simple technology to prevent things like overpayments.
We all think of Doge as slashing the waste in federal government, but we can also use it, and we forget, Department of Government efficiency. AI can make us so much more efficient across every space and every agency within our federal government.
Doge's efforts have led to mass firings of the federal workforce and the dismantling of multiple agencies. Most recently, more than $400 million in Doge-led cuts to AmeriCorps, a national service program, hit thousands of volunteers and projects around the country. 24 states are now suing.
When you have audits that show concerns, you address the concerns. You don't take apart an agency in its entirety.
Musk's interview came as the Wall Street Journal reported Tesla's board was looking at options to replace Musk as CEO while its stock price was getting pummeled. Tesla denied the reporting, with Musk calling it a deliberately false article. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
Vice President J.D. Vance visited South Carolina today, touring a steel manufacturing plant north of Charleston. It comes as the Trump administration looks to highlight the achievements of its first 100 days. Vance says President Trump's leadership marks the beginning of an industrial renaissance in the U.S.
And we are never going to allow your job to get shipped off to a country that hates us. We want to protect your jobs, and most importantly, we want to protect the great work you do right here in South Carolina and all across the United States of America.
Vance also defends President Trump's trade policy. He says the administration is rebalancing trade in favor of American workers and American businesses. Trump has insisted his sweeping new tariffs will boost domestic production. Critics argue the shifting policies are creating uncertainty. Many analysts say they will raise prices for U.S. consumers and slow economic growth. Uncertainty about the economy is being reflected in sales at America's top fast food chains. McDonald's just reported its biggest decline in sales since the peak of COVID as many customers reduced their spending. Sales at U.S. locations fell over 3.5%, the company's second straight quarter of declines. It comes as consumer confidence is at a nearly 5-year low. And all 354 Forever 21 stores in the U.S. will be closed by the end of the day. The clothing company's operator said if someone had expressed interest in buying the brand, stores would have stayed open. But there were no offers as of yesterday. Forever 21's bankruptcy filing this year led to the store closures. Its website says international locations are still open. Shark Ninja, look right here, recalling nearly 2 million pressure cookers because of a potential burn risk. The recall covers products sold at Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club, Amazon, and Target stores and online from January 2019 through March 2025 in both the U.S. and Canada. The company says the lid on the Shark Ninja Food multi-function pressure cooker can open during use. More than 100 injuries have been reported and more than 24 lawsuits have been filed. Coming up, the latest city to get a professional women's hockey league team, one of just a handful. We'll be right back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start with a possible ban on social media for minors in Texas.
Could the Texas legislature ban the use of social media for minors?
We have a youth mental health crisis. We have a responsibility in this legislature to act.
This week, the Texas House gave final passage to a bill that would require social media websites to display a warning every time you open them in Texas. But the major policy on the table is House Bill 186, a ban on the use of social media by children.
I think that we're going to wake up at some point in this country and realize what we have done to an entire generation of kids that are on this highly addictive product called social media.
The bill would require social media platforms to use a form of age verification for all users to ensure no children are making accounts on their websites.
Everybody's on the outside wanting to be Seattle.
The Emerald City, now the 8th city to host a professional women's hockey team.
And the game is the beautiful game of ice hockey, and it's fast and it's furious, and everyone's going to love it.
Seattle is such an amazing home base for the PWHL to come into.
So how did Seattle get this team?
I think Seattle's pretty obvious.
Seattle hockey fans proved they're worthy. 12,600 of them packing Climate Pledge Arena during the PWHL Takeover Tour in January. The next question, what will this new team be called?
Community is already throwing out names. Right now, when we did a poll, Seattle Tsunami, Go Tsunami, is the #1 pick.
When conversations began honoring Asia Wilson with her statue, which is erected just a few blocks from where we stand today, I'll admit I wanted hers to be the only one ever. I really did.
The always humble South Carolina basketball coach Dawn Staley wasn't thrilled at first with the idea of a statue in her honor. She's the first black coach in the NCAA Division I basketball history to win 3 national championships. She said she agreed to the statue in hopes that future generations would learn about her work off the court, advocating for equality in underrepresented communities. Coming up, students' reactions to President Trump's visit to the University of Alabama tonight for their commencement address. We'll have that and more coming up. Air tonight, we are learning the 60 Minutes report that prompted President Trump's $20 billion lawsuit against CBS is up for an Emmy Award. The story aired last fall and featured an interview with then Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Trump claims it was edited to make Harris look good. CBS denies this. The story is nominated for Outstanding Edited Interview. The annual news and documentary Emmys will be awarded in late June. Also, President Trump is currently in the air, flying to Tuscaloosa to give the commencement speech to the graduating students of the University of Alabama. Inside the Coliseum, where the speech will take place, is undergoing enhanced security measures, as well as in the city to prepare for the president's arrival. Students on campus, not surprisingly, have mixed emotions about the keynote.
I definitely think it shouldn't take away from the integrity of this campus, and it should politics and this campus life should be 2 separate entities.
My initial reaction was one of shock. As some of you may or may not know, our president's never done a commencement speech here. And irregardless of who the president is, it's just exciting to have him here. And our graduating class, I would say, is looking for a message of motivation.
Protests are also planned tonight outside of the Coliseum. Beto O'Rourke and Doug Jones are expected to speak. The president is scheduled to take the stage around 7 p.m. Central Time later tonight. And that's going to do it for us for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening as we dive into the Hollywood-style produced videos the CIA is making in an effort to recruit Chinese spies for the U.S. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tonight at 10.